It's always an incredible honor to be giving a lecture in someone else's memory, and I hold that dearly for your family. I also, as a colleague dean, thank you for investing your loved one's memory in a purpose larger than your family, that this represents such a commitment to this school. And thank you for being here. It's really a wonderful, wonderful gift that you give in so many different ways. You allow the community to come together and there to be students and alums and esteemed leaders from your past. And that alone is usually a wonderful event in the life of a school. So you've really done so many things at once, and I'm grateful for that. I'm also grateful for the opportunity to talk to you about where my energies, apart from my day job, have gone the last few years. We all choose where those energies go, I assume. The story begins back at Dartmouth, Hitchcock Medical Center, where I was for 14 years and have worked with some of you here in the audience there. And where in the early days of the performance improvement or quality improvement movement, the leading physician thought leaders were there. And so our hospital there began very early on to send every person to QI camp. And I was one of those nurses going to QI camp, and I was one of those people talking about research utilization. And I gradually made the move from research utilization to the larger real world of improving care, of improving the quality and safety of care. So when I went into academe, I was fortunate enough to have the relationships with the leaders there who held a summer symposium every summer for physician, nursing, and health administration educators. And we came together every summer and actually did most of the work that moved into medicine as the competencies that are now required by the ACGME. Your dean was a part of this summer camp experience, as we called it, as well. And each summer, we would sit around the table and we'd say, how are we going to move this work in nursing? And all of us would say to each other, if any one of you can get money, we'll be behind you. Go. And so we would go forth and keep trying to get the funding that would be necessary to do the kind of work that medicine was doing. So it starts a long ways back, and here's where we are today. I bring you greetings from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and especially to those of you who have alum ties with Carolina. We are the site, but not the sole source of a project in the country trying to change the world, if you will. And we're doing it for all the reasons that you know, and I won't go through them because in past Jowers lectures, I'm sure you have heard many, many times what the issues are that we're facing today. But we had some wisdom that came to us from the industries that went before us in attempting to improve quality and safety, and those messages were coming to healthcare even while we held on to the notion that the individual was the sole source of quality and safety. But as we began to see variations in outcomes across hospitals in the country and began to have people adopting quality improvement across hospitals, we still didn't change the way we educated people. And so we would get to the point where those of you who are from the hospital side know we would wait for the new group of nurses to come, and we would have to educate them when they got there because they had not been taught many of the issues of safety sciences. We have spent our lives feeling like if we pour in enough knowledge and we test people well enough, we will create a safe practitioner. But our systems are so much more complex now. We have to do something different. And why in nursing in particular do we have to do something different? Because really, all of us who are nurses in the audience came into this field, I would bet, because we cared about patients and the overall health of the communities in which we lived. And being able to deliver quality care is something we value. And we don't want to do this work unless we're doing it, and that families and patients are well cared for. And when we work in systems where that isn't happening, you get an eroded quality of your work life. And we have seen periods where nurses have been leaving the bedside in droves because they don't feel that they can deliver care that is good for patients and families. So we get workforce shortages, we get all those kinds of problems, and yet it is we who run these systems. It's not somebody, although we'd like to say it's them, whoever them might be. Them might be you, I suppose, but it's not. Health professionals, all of us together run these systems that we feel aren't serving us well and serving patients well, and are the source of errors that we grieve after they happen. And yet, it's us that has to improve them if we're going to do something. So one report, just to is to highlight, this report came out in 2003. Certainly it was the impetus for medicine, nursing, pharmacy, all of us to say we have to do something different. These sorts of competencies should be addressed while students are in our programs. Yet they really aren't. In all health education programs, we focus on the big box on the left, and the little box on the right really could be like a dot in terms of the amount of time that we give to those other kinds of things. Medicine worked, as I've said, to create a list of competencies that would encompass those competencies that were in that report, and they have labeled them in this particular fashion, and they have now made that a part of the medical college's accreditation, the accreditation of residency program directors, and again, your dean and I were at a meeting last week talking about how to incorporate these competencies in CME and CNE, continuing education, and recertification and maintenance of licensure issues. So, there we were. And what were our goals? It's not a small thing to think of altering professional identity formation, but the goal really was that. When those of us who worked at Dartmouth, when I worked at Dartmouth and was on the units, it would not be uncommon for a really good nurse to say to me, I'm the person you want next to that patient. I deliver the best care. I am high quality. My patients are safe. But don't bother me with committee work, teamwork, communication, anything like that. And that was an okay thing to say, because it wasn't a part of our conception that being a professional requires that you do those other things. That patient didn't receive care from that one nurse while that one nurse was in that room. The patient received care from a whole team of people, and frequently never saw the same nurse twice. So if that nurse could feel that he or she was a good professional and make that statement, it's that identity formation that needs to change. And we can't graduate students from programs in medicine, nursing, or pharmacy who would think it would be okay to make that statement, because we need to make that link that you wouldn't be a professional unless you were in fact concerned about how the whole system was organized to support the care of the patients that you cared about. So, I'll say QSEN for this project, and the name of this project is Quality and Safety Education for Nurses, funded by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, gratefully to them, now in Phase 2, with this goal to reshape professional identity formation in nursing so that it includes a commitment to the development and assessment of quality and safety competencies. And of course, it isn't, it's based in Chapel Hill. but the faculty are from across the country. And we were talking in a meeting with the QSEN pilots. You're my partner in this now because you're in the pilot collaborative. And so we were meeting a little earlier today and talking about the fact that some of the faculty have found joy in thinking about this, just like nurses find joy in working in systems that are working well. And the thing that impressed me the most in putting together the grant proposal for this was that every single person that I asked to take a leadership role said yes. Every single person was busy beyond belief. They had many, many things to do. They didn't need another project, and they all said yes for the same reason. We also, so we needed faculty experts, and indeed have a core set of faculty from around the country. There's one person who's an expert in each of the competencies, which I'll describe in a minute. And then we have also the experts in pedagogies, interprofessional pedagogies, simulation, clinical teaching, and case study, more narrative pedagogies. But the other important part is that we worked collaboratively at every step of the way in the first phase with the people who would eventually make the difference. Because of course you can have a grant and it'll run out in X years, right? And you could either do something that would last for a short period of time, or you could do something that would actually try to change the world. And if that's going to happen, you have to have the professional regulatory bodies kicking in to require the exact things that you're thinking about doing. And so we set it up so that our advisory board would bring to us both our colleagues in medicine, but also our colleagues in all of the organizations. And I won't bore the people who aren't in nursing with these, but these are the people who accredit nursing education programs. There's our nurse exec colleagues. They're the people who license us, the National Council of State Boards of Nursing. And they're the ANA and the NLN, the AACN, the organizations that are involved mostly with faculty and deans. The ANCC is the organization that credentials people after they've become nurses and certifies them there. So we tied ourselves in with all these organizations from the beginning so that we wouldn't do something that wouldn't be incompatible with them. So where are we? We're in phase 2 now. Let me just briefly say in phase 1, the goal was to sort of say, okay, medicine took the health professions education report and they defined competencies. What would make sense for nursing? What would be language that nursing would relate to, et cetera? And then to describe really what we meant by each of those competencies, the knowledge, skills, and attitudes that someone would need to develop, and to seek feedback about that, and to develop teaching strategies, and to create a website. So those were the goals. I'm not going to go into detail on the knowledge, skills, and attitudes, but I want to at least have mentioned for those of you who aren't in the project the 6 competencies that ended up being the way in which we described quality and safety competencies. And just focus on sort of what's the difference. Patient-centered care, nurses have been about since we became nurses. So patient-centered care is not a new language, and we wanted to keep that language because it means so much to us. And we've done wonderful things in the knowledge, skills, and attitudes of patient-centered care that relate to listening to patients, that we've done a lot of work on cultural competency issues. We've done a lot of work on pain and emotional comfort and suffering and those issues. The thing we felt was where we might have a gap is, did we create a student ready to work with an empowered patient and ready to work to actually empower patients and families more than they are empowered? And so we stated this competency to sort of key in on that, recognizing the patient as or their designee as the source of control and full partner in providing care. Again, where I live, I don't know what it's like here, so if I'm stepping on any toes, where I live, there are still nurses who fight allowing the family member to be by the patient's side. We still have institutions that have visiting hours and not the patient's family as full support and partner even when we know we can't assure their safety. We have tons of data about that. So why would we ever prevent them from having a loved one by their side if they wanted one there? Most of us grew up, our loved ones would be by our sides in our own hospitals. We knew that. So why wouldn't we allow there? So I came into this field doing my first research project on getting fathers in the delivery room. I mean, that was my goal, is getting them there. I had to prove they wouldn't faint. So I have been on the visitation kick for a long time. So admittedly, it's my bias, and it's in here too. We do not keep loved ones from being our partners when their loved one is under our care. Teamwork and collaboration. Again, teamwork and collaboration we talk about in nursing education programs, but it's primarily from the viewpoint of the nursing team. Almost exclusively, issues of delegation and what's a CNA and how are they and how do nurses relate to nursing assistants, etc. What we found out in doing this work is almost every place we went, everyone said that the vast majority of nursing students graduate from a nursing program never having had a meaningful interaction with a physician. Here's the person who's going to be our primary partner for the work that we do to create care for patients, and we graduate someone who's never had a meaningful interaction. So we focused on making sure, it said here, interprofessional teams, fostering open communication, mutual respect, and shared decision making. We not only don't have that interaction taking place, but we sometimes in nursing education programs do things that actually inhibit it. In some schools and with some faculty, one of the biggest insults you can hurl at a nurse is that you're working under the medical model. Well, wait a minute. The patient needs all these models. There's nothing inherently evil about the medical model from my perspective. And yet we create this sort of antagonism or set up to be not collaborative. We've tried to create separate languages when patients should have everybody working on the same problem and everybody, including the patient, be able to say what the problem is. So we've done some things, and we felt there was room to grow in a competency like this. Evidence-based practice is pretty much a common term. And yet, we found through our discussions that frequently schools didn't get beyond teaching people what basic research processes were like. That the focus really wasn't on the practice and using evidence in practice. The focus was really on how to do research. And many schools have made the transitions to really focusing on evidence-based practice, but some still haven't. And so we wanted to make sure that that was evident in this competency. And the other part was frequently you would hear faculty talk about evidence-based practice as if it were only about the evidence, when it's about integrating evidence and patient and family preferences and values so that you deliver the optimal care. Quality improvement came through the hospitals. Most and many faculty have not been a part of practice during a time in which quality improvement was such a big fact of life as it is today in hospitals for good reasons. And so it was particularly important to have a quality improvement competency, and we stated it this way: using data to monitor the outcomes of care and using improvement methods to design and test changes. That we thought it was important that nurses learn this while they're in school, and so they can come to the hospital not having to be retaught. In fact, there's a perfect thing to learn in an interprofessional environment because every professional going into that system ought to know how to do it. Safety. We pulled out, although it wasn't pulled out as a separate one, we pulled it out. And here's the reason. If you ask faculty and me and anybody, everything we're doing is about creating a safe practitioner. That is, I mean, we are designing curricula. We're doing that with the goal of having someone be a safe practitioner when they're done. But there were so many important areas of knowledge around safety that were totally foreign. Languages like, workarounds and the safety sciences and authority gradients and the impact on teamwork, et cetera, that the languages that were common, the national patient safety goals, nurses in the hospital would know them, faculty wouldn't know them, and therefore we knew students weren't learning them either. Informatics, again, a common thing and something the profession has struggled with, and we just tried to stay very much in line with what the other informatics people in the country are doing around informatics, and we had a strong link through Judy Warren in that project, because this is a critically important thing. We can't function in our systems these days, and yet, as we have more electronic medical records, we have more hospitals who don't want the students to use them while they're students. And so how are they supposed to learn these competencies if they can't use them, or if it takes 2 days to get oriented to using them, and therefore we say, okay, fine, they won't do it because we can't afford to give up 2 clinical days to an orientation to an EHR. So we've got some issues to figure out around informatics, and we didn't want that to be left out, even though there's some really good work doing elsewhere on that. So our thought was that if we did good work on these 6 things, these 6 competencies, they could serve as threads, either in curricula, as foci for accreditation programs, as for licensure and certification, for transition to work and residency programs, or for recertification and relicensure. So those were the goals. While we were doing that work, we had had the first sessions and had the first drafts, and we had the competency definitions, and we did a survey we sent it to all the program directors, all baccalaureate and higher degree deans and directors, and then all the ADN program directors in the state of North Carolina, and we asked certain sets of questions, and I'm not going to go through that because I don't think that's the important message. I just want to summarize what the results of that. Because we wondered what people would say about where they were with these competencies in their nursing education programs. And what we got back was that the overwhelming majority of schools reported that they included content and learning experiences, they were satisfied with the students' competency achievement, and they have the faculty expertise to teach the competencies, as you would expect: patient-centered care, teamwork and collaboration, and safety. The other 3 competencies, it was still a majority, but there was at least a significant minority who said they did desire more content and learning, and they didn't quite rate themselves as satisfied. It was neutral, more neutral, in how their students were doing in evidence-based practice, quality improvement, and informatics. And it also rated the lower ratings of faculty expertise to teach topics. So when you just gave people the definitions of the competencies, as you might expect, because we are doing things in these areas, people responded that we were doing things and that they were fairly satisfied. But while the survey was going on, we were doing the work on the knowledge, skills, and attitudes, which is in this article. And I think many of you have seen some of these, but it was an attempt to get down to more specifics about what each one meant. And I'm not going to go through these with you, just to say that when we did that and then went out to faculty, which we did in each of our schools, faculty said they didn't understand many of the KSAs. They're not doing it. They want to tell us how. We did a focus group of new grads who said not only didn't we learn this content, but our faculty couldn't have taught it. That was a little scary. And then this issue about, no, they've never had interprofessional content. So we had this survey which said we're doing pretty well in the world, and then we had the focus groups, once you had the KSAs in hand, who said there's a big gap between what we're currently doing and where we can see now that we need to go. We worked at the end of that first phase in getting this out to every school in the country because we thought that was critically important. And the National Council of State Boards of Nursing, I just want to plug them, have been absolutely wonderful in providing us access to their leader to leader, which hits every kind of nursing education program. And then AACN and NLN are two major nursing education organizations, also with both presidents doing commentaries on the issue of nursing outlook, and with your dean doing the lead editorial. It was just fabulous collaboration. We found out just a month or so ago that they look every 6 months at what articles are most downloaded out of Nursing Outlook, and we're very pleased that the lead article on KSAs and the article on interprofessional education were two of the top 5 downloaded articles in the last 6 months there. So we know that we're doing something on the dissemination. At the same time, of course, we were linked in with the policy organizations. And AACN, the AACN had a patient safety task force, and they were doing some sort of minor modification, was their thought, to the baccalaureate essentials. And between the two projects, the experience of their patient safety task force and QSEN going on at the same time, with one person sitting on both those projects, they decided they had to revise the entire baccalaureate essentials. And so many of you who are in baccalaureate education know now that we have a new set of baccalaureate essentials that are out for review. I hope you've been attending the regional conferences. I think one was in Georgia. And if you read those, you will see that these 6 competencies are well embedded in them. So if they're passed next year and they become the basis upon which the accrediting body looks at us, you will see a major impetus for all schools of nursing to do this work. But the big issue and the real reason we wanted to do QSEN was we figured there would be very little disagreement about the need potentially to do this. But how to do it, how to teach so that you develop these competencies seemed to be the issue. And we couldn't figure out, it wouldn't be useful to have everybody reinventing the wheel and everybody having to do it. So we started the website, which if any of you haven't seen it, please do visit. And we moved into the Pilot School Learning Collaborative as 2 initiatives. Going on the assumption that faculty and students are committed to quality and safety in all they do, I don't think there's any question whatsoever about that. But recognizing that this wasn't a lecture that you give, in spite of the fact that you're coming here for a lecture, that would never be enough. We weren't going to develop nurses that changed their professional identity formation by giving them a lecture about it. It had to be embedded in everything that they did. And that we would have to have a lot of examples if we were ever going to invite faculty to do this work. So the website is there. There are the normal things there. Annotated references are there. We have, I think, 33 or so teaching strategies where people are shared. You too can go there and type yours in and get peer reviewed and say you're there. Share them now, where we welcome any and all ideas about teaching these different competencies. We sort them so that people can go in there and sort by the competency. They can sort by the level of learner they're trying to hit. They can sort by whether they're trying in the classroom or the skills simulation lab or interprofessional learning, etc. But our goal is to have a robust website. But just like you can't change a student with a 1-hour lecture, we didn't figure a website would change faculty. So we could be wrong, but we are getting hits. As in September, we started in April. We had averaged 95 visitors a day. We're up to averaging 115 visitors a day. And what's really interesting to us is when visitors come, they're going to 7, 8, or 9 pages on average. So we know they're digging down into the website to look at something. And so that's good. We hope that'll still go up. So this was the major thing. How would you go about getting these ideas reinforced everywhere? Because we didn't think this would be a course or a lecture. It would be something that would come by just a slight switch turning in every course and in every clinical. And so we conceived for phase 2 of having this pilot school learning collaborative so that we could engage pre-licensure faculty members in the development and testing of teaching ideas. And last March, we mailed to nursing education programs, again with the help of NCSBN, inviting people to apply. And now I realize, it's always irritated me when you had to send in the letter of intent. There's this stage when you have to send in the letter that you intend to apply when you'd really rather be working on the proposal. Now I realize why you do that, because you can be the granting organization. You have no idea if anyone's going to turn anything in. And so 2 days before, when we had one application, it was a little nerve-wracking. But we ended up having 53 applications. 45 of them were very good, and were selected the 15 schools, of which we're just so grateful that you are one. Really, really exciting work that is being led here by Marcia and Jerry and Bethany. Really grateful to you. But we chose so that we would have all kinds of pre-licensure nursing education programs. So. And we didn't have to alter the criteria and the grading. It fell out that we got them, so that was good. In fact, UPMC Shadyside is a diploma program that exists within a hospital that is probably one of the premier quality improvement leaders in the country. And so, as you might expect, those faculty and students that are embedded in that system have some very exemplary practices that they've already tried. The University of South Dakota has 5 associate degree programs in the state of South Dakota, so we're getting our first look at whether or not, and they all have the same curriculum, and they're in a curriculum review, and they're going to be trying to do that there, as well as 2 others who have associate degree programs in our list. But the vast majority of applicants and the vast majority of people here are people like Carolina and Emory, where you have pre-licensure students in academic medical centers, et cetera. We really had hoped to get more applicants than we did from baccalaureate programs that stood alone without either graduate nursing programs or other health profession schools around them, because we thought it might be very different how you teach it in a small private college far away from an academic health center but at least we got one, so that was good. All of these schools have committed practice partners. They have each identified very interesting projects of their own, some of them focusing on simulation, some on innovations in clinical teaching, some on the curriculum as a whole. But they are also doing a few things in common, in addition to learning from each other, which is, of course, the major goal of the collaborative. But they will be evaluating one class of graduating students, so we get our first student perception of how well we're doing in teaching these things. And we expect that maybe won't be too high, because not any of us have been attending to this for a very long period of time. They'll be producing curricular maps with the KSAs integrated into the curriculum, and developing teaching strategies and mounting them on the website, and documenting, most importantly, what challenges they've had in doing this work, both in terms of faculty development and in student reactions to the things that they're trying, and then what strategies they use to overcome those problems. So I think that will be the most helpful of all. We have started a wiki, which I didn't even know what it was prior to doing this, and we're talking with each other apart from our conferences, which we had the first one in October, and your 3 people were wonderful, as was everyone else there. It was probably one of the most exciting conferences that I think many of us have been to in a long time. We are looking to the practice partners, obviously, to be critical in accomplishing this competency development, because a lot of what we can do would happen there. I've been saying it would be so helpful if every time a faculty member and a set of students came to a unit, if someone on that unit just stopped on the first day and said, hello, this is the unit you're coming to. This is where, this is what we're looking at in terms of our outcomes, and this is how it benchmarks against the people who are doing best in this business. And this is our error reporting system, so if you see anything, we'd really like your help. These are the errors we tend to have, so we'd like you to be especially careful there. This is the next near miss that's likely to happen on this unit, because we know where that might happen. And I'd want you to know that if you're in a situation where you're uncertain that what's about to happen is safe, the way we stop the process here is we say, we raise our hand and say, I need a moment of clarity here. If you did that every time our students came onto a unit, they'd begin to think that this was a normal part of practice, wouldn't they? Right. And it wouldn't take 10 minutes. And it would send an incredibly powerful message about what it means to be a nurse or a physician or a pharmacist. I'm only talking about nursing because I'm talking about nursing education, but this isn't any different for any of the other health professionals. We have to get to the point where we're doing exemplary learning and exemplary care together. Paul Batalden is great about trying to push us to that point where we're doing both of them together and with each other all along the way. We may need to see you using information technology in practice. We may want to make sure that we get in our simulation labs what you're using when you purchase it in hospitals, so that we can have students practice at least in the simulation lab. We want students to see team skills in action, and we've had people say, well, on the units we might take them on, they might not see team skills in action. Okay, that might be the case, but could you not reflect on that? If we said to every clinical instructor, one post-conference a semester, we want you to tell the students, that at some point you're going to be asked, for a communication across the authority gradient that you think, either because it went really well or because it didn't go so well, affected the outcomes of quality and safety for that patient. If the clinical instructor just asked for that once, wouldn't it key students in to be thinking about that throughout the semester? We want students to see patients and families that are involved as partners in care. And again, they might not always be in systems where patients and families are encouraged, but we as faculty can ask them to reflect on that and to make a statement about that. But how wonderful if they actually saw that. We would like them to interact with each other in improvement work. Again, wouldn't it be great? I don't know. The medical students, we were just at a meeting. Was it the meeting we were just at? I forget where I heard, but a physician was saying that she asked medical students to describe their work with nurses when they were just they're first coming into the residency program. And they all were silent. And then she asked again, no, I want you to tell me, where you are in terms of working with nurses. And finally one said, I think the nurse put the patient in the room when we were in the clinic. Now, these medical students had been working for 2 years in settings with nurses. They didn't know anything more about us than we have to interact with them. So this whole issue, I just had the opportunity to visit Indianapolis, where they provide the medical students themselves wanted to shadow a nurse, and as a volunteer thing. They weren't going to require it, and the faculty weren't giving them any space in their schedule. But they had this one afternoon when they could give up free time and they could do this. And over half of the medical students selected to do it. And I got to be a participant observer when in this one group of 10 medical students coming in. And the system helped by releasing a nurse to come and meet them, have lunch, and then they all left with their respective partners. And I didn't see what happened after that. But what I saw happen in that 1 hour was unbelievable. it was very awkward. And this physician and I that were watching was all we could do not to jump in and try and help the conversation get going. But eventually they got going, and they had the students were very nervous, the med students, about coming on these units. They knew the nurses were experienced. They weren't. What was, in that time when medical students are so vulnerable. And one of them finally said to the nurses, it must be really hard because you don't know any of us and we just keep coming in droves. Well, you could just see the nurses melt and say, oh, it is hard, and you're new and you're not there very long and we don't get to know you very well, but here's how we can be helpful. And then they started asking questions and going back and forth, and then they went off to shadow the nurse for that afternoon. And they said, tell us what medical students do that really bug you. And I mean, they asked really good questions. And the nurses, the nurses would leave there not treating medical students the same way as they did before they came to that hour session. So what a phenomenal intervention that didn't, again, it was self-generated, if you will. But we're there together. Why don't we take advantage of some of these opportunities? I want to end my part, and I hope we'll have a little discussion about that fact that we've worked with graduate education now a little bit. While we were doing the KSAs for undergraduate education, we did send out this information to the advanced practice nurse organizations because we were very interested to see if the competency definitions could represent all of nursing. Our goal was to be like medicine and get to something that represented all of us. And at that point is when we added the National Organization Nurse Practitioner Faculty Representative to the Advisory Board. But in April, we had our first meeting on graduate education. And again, this is for people who aren't nurses. This is nurse practitioners, CNSs, nurse midwives, nurse anesthetists, credentialing, ANA, oncology, accreditation body, psych, critical care, and peds, in some form, either a certification, et cetera. So they all came together. And we wanted to focus on advanced practice rather than all advanced roles. We could have focused on all kinds of advanced roles, informatics, administration, education, all stuff. But we thought at least we should narrow it to just focusing on practice. And we also didn't focus, we said, please set aside, some of you may be doing DMP, some of you may be doing it MSN, but could you just focus on advanced practice, regardless of what kind of program you're teaching in? And how would these look the same or different? Which of the KSAs would be still relevant? What new ones would need to be added? And how would they vary, if they had to, by specialty or role? We didn't know whether if you brought this topic up, the nurse anesthetist would have one set of competencies, the midwives would have another, and et cetera. We'd be off on that sort of thing. So I'll share just a couple slides. On these slides, I've put in green the pre-licensure KSA. Black represents that same KSA, but in the kind of language that was proposed for advanced practice. And then there are some blue items here that don't really have a corollary, and maybe they should have. But just for example, most of the changes, it had to do with going up Bloom's taxonomy, so that while a pre-licensure person might need to describe, you might have a graduate student that you expected to analyze or integrate or do something, synthesize at a higher level. So that was one major difference, which you might see here, integrating principles of effective communication, et cetera. So for patient-centered care, if we took teamwork and collaboration, not just describing your own strengths and limitations, but analyzing those and the impact on the team, and furthermore, analyzing the impact of your role on team functioning, regardless of what that role might be. And instead of just making sure you knew what people's roles and accountabilities were, guiding the team in managing the areas of overlap, which inevitably occur among the different disciplines, et cetera, initiating and sustaining, just sort of more active leadership kinds of language. In evidence-based practice, as you might imagine, it would go from reading or explaining the role of evidence in practice to critically appraising, analyzing strength of available evidence, determining where the gaps in evidence were in your practice specialty and exhibiting knowledge in your practice specialty, etc. For quality improvement, the same kinds of things, explaining the common causes of variation in outcomes of care in your specialty, asserting leadership in shaping the dialogue for introduction of best practices in your specialty, etc. Safety, the same sorts of issues. It's just we really ended up with a draft that sort of stepped up both Bloom's taxonomy and the amount of leadership expected from the nurse. So the upshot is this first draft has been out for review by all the graduate nursing organizations who participated, and the feedback has been coming in just this month. And I haven't analyzed it in the sense of sitting down and making a graph and et cetera. But I can tell you a little bit right at the moment about what people have said. The majority of organizations have said, this fits fine. We think this makes sense, et cetera. We are having tremendous pushback from the nurse practitioners as that unique group. The pushback is mainly, there's no way we could teach this unless we're at the doctoral level. That's one pushback. There's no way we can fit this into our practice. Again, the thought that this would have to be taught in a way, and I think they're sitting next to master's programs in nursing administration where this is being taught in big courses, and they think, oh, there's no way we can't get those courses in. So I'm keynoting NUMF in April, and we'll see what the whole field says if we say, because we had the opportunity to take a master's student to IHI, the Institute for Healthcare Improvement National Forum, last year as a part of another educational collaborative we're in. So I took an FMP student specifically. I didn't take one of our systems students, and because I was very interested to see how would she react to that. And she made an appointment with me immediately after, and she said, I've already been to 2 faculty members, and I've said to them, why don't we know this is going on? I'm about to go out into practice, and people are doing things to understand where their patients are, and so that they can measure whether or not they're doing better. And I don't know anything about this. Needless to say, she's a better change agent than any dean would ever be, and has now resulted in some change in the courses. But that is the point. How could we be sending someone out in practice who didn't know that it was a professional responsibility to know what your outcomes of care are, how those compared to benchmarks, whether you're doing poorly or well, and if you were doing poorly, what you needed to do to improve? Not that you'd have to know all the techniques. I don't think we can teach all the techniques probably, but to know that you ought to know that. In our state, in North Carolina now, in order to get designated as an advanced practice nurse, you have to have done a performance improvement project. That's coming. Medicine's moving to that, and we're going to have to be doing that too, and you could be randomly selected, and if you don't know something about what I'm just talking about, you're not going to get relicensed, as it should be. So we've got to think about how to do this, but that is where we are, and that is the reaction we're having there. This is a big ride at the moment, and we don't know where it's going, and I'm very interested in any comments that you would wish to make back, and any ideas or any suggestions or its meaning to your work, if you have any. I know. Oh. Yeah.